In this training session for providers, we'll review the procedures for registration and access to the Pennsylvania NEDSS Physician Registry, along with the general data entry process for registry users. Before we begin, please note that your NPI number and primary state license number will be needed to complete the registration process, so it'll be helpful to have that information handy before we get started. As a sidebar, please give us a call or send an email if any questions arise during the course of this training or the project itself. If you send an email, please include the words STD Provider Reporting in the subject line. Now let's begin with the initial registration form, which is accessible through the Pennsylvania Department of Health website. You can use the QR code shown here or type this URL into your internet browser. Registry information will be located under the section titled STD Information for Providers, which will include a link to the registration form itself. After navigating to the registration form, you'll notice there are a number of items with a small red asterisk next to the label. These asterisks indicate that this particular information is required in order to submit the registration form. And please note that this form should only be completed once at the time of registration. If you find yourself entering this information again at any other time in the future, please contact a study representative for assistance before continuing. Now let's go ahead and complete the form. Regarding the primary email address, it's important to note that this email will also serve as your username for the physician registry, but more about that later. For this field with the label Primary Facility Taxonomy, you'll notice that the word taxonomy is a hyperlink. Selecting this link will open a CMS reference page where you can find the most appropriate taxonomy code for your medical specialty. Here I'll find my specialty, copy the corresponding taxonomy code, and then I'll paste it into the registration form. So now that we've completed the form and double-checked for any errors, it's time to submit the registration by clicking the Submit button at the bottom of the page. Please note that if you need to make any changes to this form after submission, such as a change in the license number or the license state, please contact a study representative who'll be able to make these changes for you. Once the registration form is submitted, providers will need to wait for their accounts to be approved by a study representative. In general, accounts are approved within 24 hours of submission, during which time the provider should receive an email invitation from REDCap Cloud to access the Pennsylvania NEDSS Physician Registry. It looks like the invitation email from REDCap Cloud has arrived, so let's open the link as instructed by the email text and set up a password for the physician registry. Once that's completed, we can then proceed to log into the system with the password that we just set up. It may be helpful at this point to bookmark the registry login page to make it easy to find the next time you need to add a patient to the registry. If in the future you forget your password, you can click the Forgot Password link here and you'll be shown instructions on how to reset your password. So let's go ahead and log into the system. And after logging in, you should arrive at a web page that looks something like this, with a link to access the Pennsylvania NEDSS registry here. Let's open the registry project and walk through the data entry process for a test patient. Once inside the registry, you'll notice a left side vertical menu with the corresponding horizontal row of submenus. The tab labeled Patients is the most important for us, but I'll briefly show you the other items just for orientation. Within the Study tab, we have two submenus, Study Overview and Details. The Study Overview window provides a high-level enrollment summary of patients that the provider has enrolled to date. Since I haven't enrolled any patients yet, this screen looks empty, but don't worry, this will begin to look more substantial after adding some patients. The Details tab just provides some basic general information about the registry. Now, moving to the Patients tab, this is where all of the data entry is going to happen. It looks empty now, but let's go ahead and add a test patient to see how this works. To add a patient, click the button labeled Plus Add. This will bring you to a page where you're asked to add the date of screening, which defaults to the current date. This date field can be adjusted with these drop-down options as appropriate. If your practice covers more than one site, you'll see a second drop-down menu where you'll need to also select the site where this particular patient was treated. At this point, we can either select the button labeled Save and Enter Data or the button labeled Save and Exit. If for whatever reason you're not quite ready to enter data for this new patient, you can select the Save and Exit button, which will bring you to the beginning of the process where another patient could be added, for example. However, since I'm happy with the default screening date and I'm ready to enter data for this patient, I'll continue by clicking the button labeled Save and Enter Data. And this brings us to the data entry interface where the registry instrument is available for access. Under this event column is a collapsible menu, so clicking the item labeled Provider Reporting will reveal a direct link to the form immediately below, and this is where our patient data will be entered. So let's open the form and enter some data for this test patient. And immediately we can see that, similar to the registration form at the beginning of the session, several of the fields in this form have a red asterisk, which again means that these particular items are required in order to complete the data entry process for this patient. You'll also notice this form has at least 2 sections indicated by the horizontal sections listed at the top of the form. However, more sections could appear depending on the data that's entered. So I'll start entering some test data and we'll catch up with you in just a moment. Now, in this field labeled County FIPS code, a link has been provided to help with looking up the FIPS code for a particular zip code, county, or city in which the patient resides. For this example, I'll say that the patient resides in Dallas, Texas. After opening the link, I'll type Dallas in the search box, and after clicking Go, I'll select Dallas, Texas as the correct city. And up comes a list of zip codes and corresponding FIPS codes covering Dallas, Texas. Find the appropriate FIPS code tied to the patient's zip code and enter the FIPS code into the form. I'll continue entering data and we'll catch up with you shortly. Here at the bottom of the first section, I've encountered a data field that, when answered, triggers a subsequent field to open. Also, if I indicate that the patient is female, some additional questions populate regarding pregnancy status. Be sure to complete all of these subsequent questions, as most of them are required. Once reaching the end of the section, select the Next button to start the next section with the title Reported Tests. While completing this section, you'll notice that an additional section appeared after I selected Yes next to the label Tested for Gonorrhea this visit. This additional section allows the provider to input the results of the indicated test. Other sections for chlamydia, syphilis, and HIV will appear in a similar fashion if Yes is selected for those items as well. We'll stick with our current selection and begin entering the results for gonorrhea by clicking the Next button. So now I'll enter the appropriate treatment information, and when completed, I will scroll back to the top of the form and click Save and Mark as complete. And just like that, we've completed data entry for our first patient. Clicking the Return button will bring us back to where we started. If we revisit the Study tab, we'll see that the enrollment status is updated to include the first test patient. Now, before we finish up, let's walk through a few scenarios that you may encounter. In this first scenario, how do I enter data for a patient who was treated more than once, such as in a follow-up visit? In this registry, each one single record that is created in the system represents one single encounter. Therefore, if a patient is treated on more than one occasion, regardless of the treatment that was given, then each occasion should be entered as a new record. In this case, we would end up clicking the +Add button for the first visit, and after collecting the data, we'd then click the +Add button again for each subsequent visit, and so on and so forth. And here's the second scenario. Can I make changes to the data after I've already marked the form as complete? The answer to this question is yes. Data can be changed even after an encounter has been marked as complete, but you'll also need to provide a reason for the change that was made. To do this, you'd navigate to the record in question, select the small pencil icon next to the incorrect data, and then make your change. At this point, you'll need to include a reason for the change in the text box that appears. When ready, click the button labeled Change, and then click Save and Exit, which will lock in your changes. And here's our final scenario. Once I begin entering data for a new patient, do I have to fully complete the data entry for that patient all in one sitting? For this one, the answer is no. You do not have to complete all data entry in one sitting. Let's say, for example, you get partway through a record and are suddenly called to an emergency. The immediate action to take within the registry is to click the Save button in the upper right portion of the window. Then, after saving your progress, click your username in the upper right corner and select either the Log Out option or the Lock Screen option. Upon doing so, stepping away from your computer will keep your data intact and will prevent anyone else from interacting with the data during your absence. You can always log back in when you return to pick up where you left off. On Windows computers, it's always a good idea to use the key combination Windows L to lock your computer anytime you step away from your desk, regardless of what task you're working on. To lock the screen on a Mac computer, use the key combination Control-Command-Q. This concludes the training video for the NEDSS Physician Registry project sponsored by the Pennsylvania Department of Health and powered by RedCap Cloud.